Guys, welcome into another episode of 410 Sports Talk. I'm James Haskell, along with my co-host Glenn Martin and the infamous D-Rob, David Robinson. We got on the show. David, thank you for coming on. Of course, if you guys don't know, he's a professional wide receiver coach. He's worked with a lot of guys throughout the NFL. Namely, if you're a Raven, he's had some time working with Hollywood. We've seen the videos with you and James Prochet, that is, and then of course Devin Duvernay as well. So we're really excited and grateful for your time. Thanks for coming on the show, man.
Man, I appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And why don't you tell fans before we get too far into it, where are you at right now? And we know you're sitting in the car. Where are you coming from, man?
Man, I'm coming from LSU. Just came from Terrace Marshall Pro Day. Checking him out. I was with him for 9 weeks. He did a hell of a job today, man. Ran 4.38, ran really good routes, tested out the waters, and helped himself, man, skyrocket up the board.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm nervous about that because I was seeing he was mocked in the second round, and I was hopeful he'd be around for the Ravens at 27. But with that time and those routes he was running out there, snatching every ball in his era, man, I'm worried he might price himself a little too high for Baltimore.
Exactly. That was the goal.
Yeah, I'm sure. And I know, and just so everybody knows, he's worked with a bunch of all pros, Antonio Brown, Emmanuel Sanders, Des Bryant, formerly of the Ravens. So this guy knows his stuff. And I know we asked this question to you last time we had you on the show, but I just want to give some new fans, a little bit of a glimpse. Like what makes a guy a good route runner? Because when I watch a couple of receivers run, I'm just a fan, David. So I don't really know. They all look good to me. I mean, yeah. So what when you're looking, what do you look at that tells you, wow, this guy's a good route runner?
Well, someone who can make every route look the same, make every route look like they're going vertical and under control at the top of their route. And we'll also make sure a really good route runner is not giving your route away, not showing any indicators with your body language, keeping everything the same, and being efficient with your footwork at the top of your routes. So that's what makes a lot of receivers really good route runners. That's what makes a lot of receivers really good route runners in the NFL, especially when they're doing intermediate routes of that nature. When you're fast and you can run, I mean, you don't really have to be technically sound. You can just go fly by and catch the ball. But in order to stop, you have to be under control and have a great balance and great footwork at the top of your routes.
Well, I tell you what, man, you can tell you're full of knowledge, and this is definitely your profession. And in fact, speaking of that, the Ravens just hired a few guys that I'm sure you've had some interactions with, and I'm sure you guys as colleagues in the same field, know each other and respect each other. Of course, they hired a pair of offensive assistant coaches this offseason with Keith Williams and T. Martin. And then, of course, they've both worked with wide receivers in college, pro level. They were obviously brought in to help develop these young guys. Being a wide receiver coach yourself, what are your thoughts on these guys and the value that they bring to our team? And then specifically based on the fact that our oldest guy in the wide receiver room as it stands right now is 27 years old, Sammy Watkins. We got a ton of young guys in there. So based on that, what do you see as the value of these two guys coming in?
Well, with Keith Williams, you're definitely getting, a technician at the wide receiver position. He's going to hold those guys accountable in their route running. He's going to teach them different tricks of the trade on how to get open versus certain leverages when defensive backs are playing you a specific way. He's just going to get those guys football IQ and football concept about their game up a lot. And I think that's going to help a young wide receiver room. And with T. Martin, it's pretty much the same way. He used to play quarterback. So he's going to help these guys with their timing and spacing when it comes from a quarterback standpoint and getting open and being where you're supposed to be of that nature in their route running. So I think go hand in hand, both of those guys together are going to develop the wide receiver room tremendously.
And what I was going to ask you as a follow-up to that, what was your take when you saw the news? Because I feel like it's kind of unique what the Ravens did there. Last year they had one guy in David Culley kind of doing the job that both of these guys are going to be doing. And, both of these guys coming from the college ranks, they're relatively new in the NFL world as far as working on a team. You're not necessarily working with individuals, working on a team. What was your take when you saw that, when you saw the headline pop up? Do you think it was interesting or kind of walk us through that, your thought process there?
Well, shoot, I was actually a bit disappointed. I mean, me and Keith had just talked like maybe 2 or 3 days before he got the job. about putting together an NFL wide receiver camp. We were about to get it in motion because it's
Oh,
never been done before, you know. And then I look up and saw the news. I'm like, oh man, Keith, you didn't let me know. So,
he's gonna be a little busy, huh?
yeah. But I was happy for him though, you know. But we were just talking about that man a few days before he got the job. So I was happy. And I definitely, when I found out that he got the job, I knew that the Baltimore Ravens were serious about upgrading their pass offense.
Yeah,
Thank goodness.
that's good to hear because that has been the one position that the Ravens haven't been able to draft a Pro Bowler out. It's been and it's crazy. As good as they have been at drafting, that's the one spot they haven't been able to get that Pro Bowler. But seemingly everyone from fans to pundits, even some former Ravens, believe the Ravens need to add and surround Lamar Jackson with more weapons on the outside. And we may agree to a point, but we've also been trying to preach patience when it comes to the young guys that are already on the roster. And we're hopeful that they can develop into the weapons that the offense needs to succeed. So you've worked with a bunch of these guys on the roster. What can you tell Ravens fans about Devin Duvernay and James Prochet and even Hollywood Brown that might ease their concerns about the thought of them needing to add more talent at that position?
Well, yeah, when you're bringing in a passing game coordinator that are going to use these guys' strengths, um, and Devin Duvernay, you're going to get somebody, of course, that's going to be able to stretch the field. He didn't get many opportunities as he would like this past season with him being a rookie, but definitely with him, you can stretch the field. You can do a lot of gadget plays with him. Hollywood Brown, he emerged towards the end of the season, showing that he can be more consistent. You know, when you're coming his way, he just needs more targets, man, and more experience throwing the ball to him. And with James Prochet, you know, they had him a lot doing special teams. He didn't really get a lot of playing time, a lot at receiver, but they need to work him a lot more in that slot. Those seam routes, those option routes would be good for him. And another receiver, man, that the Ravens missed last year due to injury, who's been working his butt off this offseason, is looking really good, is Antoine Wesley. He's a big 6'5", 6'6" wide out, man, who can really play, really go up and get the football and sink his hips and get out his routes really well. And I think you know when he's back this year all healthy with probably somebody else added in the draft, I think they'll be just fine.
Mm. Well, that definitely gets me excited. And so let's stay on the topic. I have a few questions I want to ask about these guys. Just as a follow up to that, you kind of talked about what Devin and James can do, but what are your expectations this year for them? Like, you know, when you're having conversations with them, or when you're hearing about what their goals are, what do you think that their realistic next step forward is coming into this season?
Well, with Duvernay, he wants to show that he can be more of a vertical threat, more targets downfield. Wants to put the ball in the end zone a lot more. And with James, I mean, James just wants to get in the game and just show what he can do. When I talk to him, it's about just staying ready, for his opportunity because it's going to come. And, he's just going to have to, wait his turn and be patient because he was a late round draft pick. But I think I told him also he's going to have to make a lot more big splash plays in the special teams department on returning those punts because the more that they see that you can, make a lot of guys miss and get great yards after the catch in the punt return game, they'll start using you more in the offense. Just like how they did Dante Hall back in the day.
Same thing with Steve Smith, right? Like he came in as a special teams guy.
Yeah, he didn't waste any time to show. I think he took the first kickoff of his career back all the way for a touchdown. So
so he's going to have to just be more dominant in the punt return department to get more opportunities on the offense. That's what I told him.
Yeah, and they definitely both showed that they could do that. I mean, James was the initial punt returner, and then Devin kind of took over that role towards the end of the season, but was always the kick returner. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they divvy up that responsibility, especially the punt returner, because they both showed they could do it and do it at a high level. So it'll be interesting to see how they, eventually decide to do that. Do you look at those two guys as like different skill sets? Like, do you look at as one is more of an outside and one is more of an inside? Talk about the differences between those two guys and what they both bring, separately.
Well, in my opinion, I think they're both are slot receivers.
Okay.
I don't think that you should use those type of guys on the outside. What separates them is James is more of a dig out runner, option route runner, guy that can win you third down matchups. And Duvernay He's more of a guy that's going to take the top off of the defense. More of your reverse guys that you run reverse trick plays with, things of that nature. So those are two completely different skill sets. I think Prochet is more of an intermediate route runner, and Devin Duvernay is more of a vertical stretch guy.
And what about Hollywood? Would you consider him more of an inside or outside, or a guy that can do both?
He can do both, but I would consider him more of an. He would be more effective if he was to move into the slot.
Gotcha. So it sounds like they got a lot of slot guys.
Just because when he's on the outside, he's against those bigger and longer corners and things of that nature, and he has a tendency to get pushed wide a little bit on some of his vertical routes, and it makes the throw a little bit tougher for the quarterback.
Well, and that's interesting too, because if we have like Glenn was saying, I mean, if we have a lot of guys that play the slot well, I think that favors Lamar Jackson, his strengths with being able to throw the ball to a number of guys on the inside, in between the hashes, in between the numbers and things like that. But one of the things I wanted to ask you about, and you kind of touched on this, with Devin Duvernay specifically, last year, it seemed like every time he got the ball, he made a play. I mean, every single time, inevitably, whether it was like you were saying, a gadget play, whether it was a reverse, a jet screen, a jet sweep, or even on special teams, he was always making a play, making an impact. What do you think it was that the coach? I mean, if you could put your hand on or your finger on anything that identified why they weren't using him that much, do you think there's anything particular or any reason that you can point to say, well, they weren't using him that much because of this? Because to us, like just as fans, like Glenn said, we wanted him on the field more. We wanted him touching the ball more, but it just didn't seem to happen that much. What do you think the reason for that was?
Just the coach's trust. He probably just didn't trust them, or just didn't pick up the playbook. One of those things. It had to be something in-house that we didn't know about for why he was not getting a lot of targets. But I think that's pretty much the only reason. Probably not knowing where to line up, or not knowing certain plays, or coach just didn't trust them.
Yeah,
and that kind of leads right into my next question, because last season was the anomaly. There was no offseason. I mean, there was no preseason games, and this year they're at least hoping that they can get back to some normalcy there and have a full training camp, have OTAs, and have a preseason schedule. How much of a difference could a full offseason program mean for these young wide receivers?
Oh, it's night and day. It's a big difference. It's almost impossible to come in as a rookie with no off season and hit the ground running and be effective. So I applaud what Justin Jefferson did. A lot of those young receivers who came in right off the bat and got acclimated quickly, because that is very, very hard to come in as a rookie receiver with no chemistry, no team camaraderie. Before all the veterans get there or anything of that nature, you have to go in with everybody else and running, and things are happening fast, and that playbook is thick, and you have to pick it up fast, so they're not as patient with you. So it's a big difference. It's going to help a lot of rookies out this year once they're able to get drafted and start OTAs.
Yeah, big time. We're definitely excited about that. You're talking about rookies, and one of the things, of course, that you mentioned, you're just leaving a pro day. There, with pro day and everything going on right now, there's a lot of film on 40 and 40 times. But there are often times where Glenn and I will be watching film and a guy will put up a really good 40, but it doesn't seem to translate to the field, right? Like the separation isn't there, or something else. Just they don't look as fast on the field. What is it about a receiver, or what when something like that happens, what does it tell you about a player, right? So like when he's able to blaze a 4.4 or a 4.3, but he's not doing it on the field, what's missing there usually?
Well, he just doesn't trust himself on stopping, and it's difficult for him for his change of direction. It's difficult for him to sink their hips. So most receivers, they can really run 4.3, 4.4, and can stop on a dime. Those are really, really special wideouts that you want to keep around your organization for quite some time. But it's when you see a receiver run fast like that and can't really run his routes the way you would like, it's because they don't trust themselves stopping. They don't trust them. They don't trust sinking and dropping their weight to the top of their routes, getting into their breaks. and they have to work on that. When you're fast like that, you have to get used to running your routes, not full speed like a 40, but make it look like it. So you have to hold back some speed, and it takes a lot of technical work and working on your game to clean it up.
That's interesting, Glenn, because I never really thought about that. The reason you don't want to go too fast because you don't trust yourself. You don't have good brakes, right?
Yeah.
It's like going in 60 seconds, man. Good brakes, right?
You need them good breaks. But yeah, that's interesting because I watched some guys and I'm like, man, I don't know if he has the top end speed to separate. And then he runs a 40 and he runs a 4.4 or 4.38. And I'm like, well, why didn't it look like that on the field? You know, he wasn't able to separate against like Big 12 corners, but yet he can run a 4.38. It's confusing. So, but yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I guess you got to be able to stop and you got to be able to get in and out of your breaks. But with the pro days finishing up and the draft around the corner, some Ravens fans are hoping that the Ravens draft their future number one wide receiver, you know, that most people have been wanting. You've worked with some of these guys in this year's draft class. So what's the quality of this year's bunch? And are there any guys that aren't being talked about enough in your opinion?
Yeah, it's a lot of receivers in this draft. You're going to find some really good receivers, I believe, in the later rounds. It's going to be a flush of them in the first 2 rounds, but they're going to space out as the draft goes on. And I think you're going to find some really first round grade receivers in the 4th round, late 3rd round. Guys that people really haven't been talking about. Tyler Wallace out of Oklahoma State.
Mm-hmm.
One of the guys that I used to work with, Rondale Moore out of Purdue. He ran the 40, ran 4.2. He's a guy that hasn't been talked about enough. Jalen Jordan out of North Texas, he can go. So it's gonna be guys that you find like that, man. The big receiver today, out of LSU, I believe his name was Reese. I forgot his last name, but he ran 4.33. Yeah, and no one even knows really about him. So he'll probably end up going like 4th round, 5th round. So it's gonna be some guys that you can really find in that later round receivers to be your depth chart.
So I want to kind of change gears and go back for a second, talking about James and Devin, just for a quick second here. What in your interactions with them, what is their difference in confidence going into their second season in comparison to their rookie season?
Well, you can just see the sense of urgency within the pep in their step. When they're working out. You can see that, when they get to the workouts 20, 30 minutes early, they're already warmed up, stretched, sweating and stuff before the workout starts. So you can tell that they've been in the NFL for a year and, just how they approach the workout. They the high energy guys after each catch, after each drill, they're catching it and finish it all the way down to the end zone. So you can tell that their practice habits have picked up tremendously.
Yeah, they're not surrounded by boys anymore, right? It's a man's world they're playing in now, right?
Nah, exactly.
Yeah, they're playing with grown men and against grown men. But one of our patrons, Billy Seeley, has a question, and he said he'd like to know about the work that the second-year guys are targeting. Like, what are some of their strengths of their game, and then what are some areas where their game needs to improve that can really take them to the next level?
Well, of course, with Devin, everybody knows he can run. He just needs to continue to work on his speed cuts, continue to work on, his intermediate routes, his 45-degree angle cuts, and just being more of a consistent catcher with his hands. Those are the things Devin can clean up. Prochet, he just needs to continue to work on his speed, continue to get faster, and pretty much just showing improvements on a daily basis that he can go get the D ball.
Gotcha. Nice. Now, there's a couple futures guys on the roster. I'm curious, have you worked or do you know much about either Deion Kane or Benjamin Victor?
Yeah, I got Ben Victor ready for the draft last year.
Okay, could you tell some fans about them?
I call him. Yeah, he kind of run and build like a praying mantis. But I love Ben Victor, man. Very long wide out. Very long wide out. He has great ball skills, man, and can go up and get that 50-50 ball. So I'm excited to see what Ben does, man. I hope he gets the opportunity. I don't know much about Deion Kane, but I've seen Ben Victor in person, and he's a sleeper. He's going to be able to help if he can crack through.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I tell you what, I think that the Ravens fans, hopefully, based on your comments, are a little more calmed down, because I'm sure you've seen the narrative. They're all nervous about our lack of weapons and things like that. But it sounds like you have a lot of faith in Devin and James and even
Antoine Wesley.
Yeah. Antoine Wesley, yeah, and even the praying mantis himself, right?
Antoine Wesley. Yeah. Don't sleep on my man Wesley, man.
That's awesome. I'm excited about him because I think he's shown out a couple times in training camp. I'm sure. I think you and I were talking about this a couple training camps ago, Glenn.
Mm-hmm.
And he's done that. I think he's been with us for 2 consecutive training camps now, and he's played really well. He just hasn't been able to, like you were talking about, give an opportunity on the field. But I'd love for him to be able to make it because he's a big body guy that we need. So, David, why don't you let our fans know where they can follow and check out anything that you're working on and follow you as well.
My Twitter, D-Rob Always Open with the Z, and my Instagram is D-Rob Always Open. Just D-Rob Always Open regular. And my website is drobαλwaysopen.com.
That's awesome.
And, the only thing I have special going on is getting the next draft, getting the next NFL offseason guys ready, man. That's pretty much it.
Oh, no big deal, right? Just working with
working with a bunch of pros, no big deal. No biggie.
Yeah, man. Shoot, that's awesome. I tell you what, our schedule is always open for you, D-Rob. All right, pun intended. We appreciate your time tonight. Drive safe back to your house, and have a great evening.
All right, man. Appreciate you guys.
Have a good one.
Thanks, D-Rob.
All right.
Well, Jimbo, that sounded pretty encouraging. I mean, I liked hearing Coach Robinson talking up some guys and talking about some guys that I didn't even think about. Antoine Wesley, I'd forgotten about that guy, but certainly brings the physical tools that they would be looking for an outside guy. But the one thing that was a little bit it was interesting to hear that he kind of views all those 3 main guys as inside guys, as slot guys. So it still seems to be, unless Antoine is that in fact the guy that fills that hole, we still have a hole on the outside.
Well, and don't forget we got Sammy.
That's true. And Boykin is still here.
We'll just say Sammy for now.
Okay. All right.
But I'm terrible, man. You got me on this Boykin train, and now I'm like piling on. But yeah, I agree with you because I feel like Antoine there's been buzz around him for a couple preseasons now, and then he just never seems to be given an opportunity. Can't crack the roster, whatever the case may be. So, but I still think his chances are really low. Especially if they draft a guy.
If they draft a guy, then yeah, it definitely would cut down his chances. There's no doubt about it. But it was still encouraging to hear how high he was on him. I mean, he kept bringing him up. He wanted to make sure people didn't forget about him. And I think that I don't think there was ever a doubt on, his ability to go get the ball. It was more, can he separate, because he's a big guy, typically those big guys are long striders. And if he doesn't have that top end speed, then how does he separate from NFL corners? But Coach D-Rob, I mean, that's his job, and he sounded real excited about it. Yeah,
well, look, maybe we can stop with the Boykin the tight end thing, right? And just throw Wesley. He's taller. He's already got better hands, probably. No, but realistically, though, yeah, that's a great point, and someone that's under the radar. But also, I mean, just him talking about James and Devin helps me feel more encouraged with their increased confidence. And not only that, I liked how he talked about their whole shift in preparation between going into the NFL and being in the NFL now, like knowing the importance of doing things like being there early, warming up, stretching, being high energy all the time, finishing all these plays, because these guys are used to being alphas in whatever program they're in college. Because let's be honest, whatever round you're drafted in, if you're drafted, most likely you're an alpha at your college team, right? That's just, it is what it is.
Unless it's a late round and they're just going off your physical. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But in 8 out of 10 guys are
the man.
Yeah, on campus, exactly. So certainly nice to hear that they're hungry, still got it, and they're really focused on getting better. What
I
did you think?
also liked hearing about him talking about the coaches. I mean, he was getting ready to team up with Keith Williams and put on a show with a bunch of all pros and pro bowlers and pros alike. And he was a little disappointed that Keith Williams got a little busier and joined the Ravens staff, but obviously has a lot of respect for what he does. And I think it was exciting to hear that he looked at that as a commitment that the Ravens are making to improving that area of their team.
Yep. So that was huge for me as well. I have to totally agree with you there because to be an outsider that's also professional like him, an outsider as far as like he's not in the Ravens room, and to him react that way, for him to react that way is definitely a big deal. What did you think about what he said though? That was one takeaway for me as far as like most important. The other thing that I thought was interesting, what did you think he said about, there was an internal thing, maybe Devin wasn't picking up the playbook or the coaches didn't trust him. I thought that was pretty interesting. And some interesting information. What did you think about that? Because the only thing I'll push back on that is that, like, I don't know, for some reason the Ravens are kind of reluctant, I feel like, to use their young guys on offense. It's the same thing. It took a while for JK to get more time. He was visibly upset for being pulled. Now when he was given the reins, obviously JK sort of took off. But what did you think about those comments? I thought they were, pretty interesting. However, before you give your answer, the one thing I'll say is, I don't know if it was a trust thing. I don't know if that was what it was. But what's your take?
Well, I think what he means is you have to show you can do everything in practice before they're willing to give you that opportunity in the game. So if Prochet was missing his reads and going in when he was supposed to go out, or if you mentioned JK, if JK wasn't picking up the blocking scheme and he wasn't able to pick up blitzers in practice, well, then they're not going to put him out there in the game and ask him to do the same thing. So I think when he said trust, it's just about you have to show that you can do these things in practice before we're going to go ask you to do them on Sundays, even though we do know that there are some guys who are just gamers who just don't get up for practice like they do for game day, and that they're just different when they're out there, and actually in between the white lines and playing under the whistle. But I think the biggest thing for me was the full offseason. That is going to be a huge, huge difference because these guys were learning as the season was unfolding. Yeah. Whereas now that learning curve is pretty much gone because they learned it, through the season. But then they're going to be able to double down and really put their head in the playbook and drill out these details. And then they won't have those trust issues, I assume, with their coaches because they know these guys know the play, they know what to do, they know where to be and when to be there. So I'm hopeful that with this full program and those two new coaches that trust level will be there.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. But man, I tell you what, you can tell, super busy guy, always on the road. Obviously, he's just leaving LSU. We appreciate his time and his thoughts. We're really excited about these guys moving forward. We're hoping that you guys as Ravens fans, along with us, feel more confident in our guys that we have internally. We're not saying that we got the Buccaneers wide receiver room, right? Yeah. But we do believe there's more meat on the bones, if you will, than sometimes outward the national media and even the local media will give our guys.
Well, look, Jimmy, we're just as bad. I mean, we put our receiving core where when we rank them in the. Well, I mean, let's be honest. Let's hold ourselves just as accountable. We are. But I think that there's still so much room to grow. You mentioned that our oldest guy is Sammy Watkins. Well, yeah, but Sammy wasn't even here last year,
right?
I'm not so sure how much he's even been in the building to this point. So we were counting on a lot of young guys with no offseason. So and he mentioned that guys like Jefferson from Minnesota, the fact that they were able to pick it up day one and hit the ground running and be successful was really a credit to them. Yeah. But it's not expected. I mean, it's not something that everyone should have been expected to do day one. So I'm encouraged by the fact that they're young, they're hungry, their work ethic is high, and they're ready to get the job done. But most importantly, I think the commitment from the staff to make sure they're developed the right way, committing to the details. I mean, I loved hearing that Keith Williams was a tactician, so I'm just excited. I hope you guys are as well. We appreciate, the questions that we got from the patrons and from some other fans. But let us know how you guys feel coming out. Did it ease any of your concerns? Did it make you feel, do you feel the same way? I mean, I'm curious to know if this changed any opinions of fans out there who were who were worried, or if they're still feeling the same way heading into the draft.
Yeah, let us know what you think. Leave your comments below, and shout out to Nico, our newest patron.
Yeah.
Big shout out. Really excited to interact with him. And if you guys are interested in interacting with us more, check out the link in the description below, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
See you.